Hello friends, this is Eli from Mystic Circuits. Today I'm going to be showing you how to use Anna 2 to convert a voltage sequence into a pair of interlocking gate sequences using the fabulous box output. Right now I have our sequence coming from a tree leaves combo that's just giving us a nice simple 8-step analog sequencer. I have it running into tides and modulating the interval parameter. Tides is running in oscillator speed in the frequency multiply mode. So what we get going through the natural gate is one channel at tides. And then here's the other channel, which we'll be using later. One of the nice things about using tides in this mode is it gives you all these pretty chords that are just sort of, they're almost like preset chords, but they have a slightly non-Western, just intonation sort of quality to them, where I'm not necessarily thinking, oh, this is a major or minor chord. It just kind of gives me interesting stuff. So decided to use it for this video, obviously running through the natural gate, and I have some drums off screen from the Erica sample drum that I'll be showing later. But yeah, let's go ahead and dig into this patch. Basically what you're going to need is to plug your voltage sequence into the shift input for channel 1. In the manual, I showed this going into the main input, and you can still do that, but I've actually discovered that the shift input gives better results. Next, we'll plug out of box going into the hit, which is the trigger input on the natural gate. As you can see, moving either of these knobs is going to sort of change the threshold voltage, where box is going to give you a gate. Right? You might get silence in some areas. You might get simple stuff in other areas, but this gate sequence is being derived from this voltage sequence over here. And just to illustrate that, I'm going to leave Anna's settings alone and change our voltage sequence. As you can hear, the rhythm is changing in reaction to the changes in the voltage sequence, right? And it's not just when a gate is high or low. It's when it's sort of alternating between high and low that you start to get interesting stuff, right? Because what box wants you to do is it wants one of the channels to cross over the voltage of the other channel, right? So if I'm sort of messing with the range of this threshold voltage, we can start to sort of explore different parts of this. Okay, so now's a good opportunity to show you how to get a second voltage sequence out of your Anna 2. Basically, off screen, I have another Anna 2 that I'm using just to invert the voltage of the box output. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mult this box output, because one of the things about box is that you get 3 levels to it. You get a positive square wave, 0 volts, and a negative square wave. So if you use either an attenuate offset, a through 0 VCA, just any kind of voltage processor that can invert, your voltage, what you're going to end up getting is a second gate stream. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that second gate into our second hit out input on the natural gate. And as you can see, we get a second sequence. So now any changes in either the voltage sequence or the position of Ana2 is going to change both of these voltage sequences. Now, you might keep in mind that because we get the second sequence by inverting the first sequence, because Box has 3 levels, that means that while both gates can be off at the same time, which corresponds to the output of Box being 0, not both sequences can't be on at the same time, right? So they're only going to alternate with each other. I've had a lot of luck using this for hi-hats, for percussion where I want things to have some space in between them. Here you can see that we get like a little bit of polyphony, because if the envelopes are overlapping, you can hear both notes at once, but it's not like I'm playing a chord, right? It's more like I'm striking a marimba or something like that, right? Where the notes ring out, but they're not taking over everything. I'm going to go ahead and actually plug in some drums that I have up here just so that we can hear the whole effect. One or two more tricks that this patch has up its sleeve. One is obviously that instead of sitting there twiddling channel 2, I can run an LFO into channel 2. And now we have our gate sequence being sort of influenced by the voltage level of the LFO. You can hear that sometimes the LFO is getting to voltage ranges that correspond with the sort of dead zones that we were finding when changing the knob manually. This can be kind of a nice effect because it spaces everything out. It makes things less sort of chaotic, right? Even though it's changing all the time. And obviously a slower LFO would probably also make things less chaotic. But something else that we can do is we could sort of have a low range for our LFO and then have this going pretty high up here so that the voltages only overlap when the LFO is at its higher range. And then this knob will sort of become because we're pushing our voltage sequence to go sort of into upper territory where it doesn't have a lot of room, right? So all of the space where the LFO is below our voltage sequence, it's not going to have much of an effect. So this knob sort of then becomes the density of the gate sequence, whereas this is sort of modulating the timing. But obviously we want it to be a little more exciting than that, right? Okay, the other trick, which I'm going to show separately, and I'll go ahead and put this back here. I'm going to take the voltage sequence out, plug this back in here, so you can hear we're just getting the gates, our voltage sequence that was modulating the interval isn't happening anymore. I'm going to plug that into step. Basically what this is going to do is it's going to give us a voltage sequence that only really changes when we get a gate out of the box. And also which we could sort of transpose using the second knob. So now we get a way to change both the voltage sequence and the gate sequence together. And I would definitely advise doing this pre-quantizer, as that's going to give you the most musical results. Of course, you'll know if that's not what you're into, but here I'm doing it into the interval modulation, which is always going to be a sort of musical value, right? So you can hear, no matter where I go on this knob, I'm still getting everything's still in tune, right? Even with the chords and everything, everything's in tune. Oh, that's nice. And you'll notice that actually the voltage sequence coming out of step reacts to the changes in both knobs, right? So this almost gives you like the range of notes, like how much they deviate away from this bass note. And then this becomes almost like the key that you're in. I'm going to turn this up just so you can hear that the notes aren't changing on every step, right? Normally on these 8-step sequences, you get a different note on every single step, which can get boring after a while, right? You can put the sliders in the same position, but this is a more kind of interesting automatic way to do it, a generative approach, let's say. Now, I can't promise this is going to sound good, but try plugging that LFO back in. As you can hear, the LFO is also scrubbing our pitch, right? So we're getting not only really low pitches, which I can change on tides, but also these sort of like arpeggios happening when the LFO is going through the pitch range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the range of the interval modulation and set the variable higher. I'm doing this all off screen, of course. There you go. We've got some generative sequencing going on with Anna, just using a voltage sequencer and an LFO. And of course, we're also using our voltage processor to get the second trigger out of it. But maybe you can start to see some possibilities here. You know, let's say with a longer sequencer, you could have one voice repeating itself and the other one sort of riffing on the overall theme. With generative sequencing, you have an easier, like feeding in another generative sequencer, you get an easy way to get these trigger outs for free. You know, this technique with box, where you're inverting the box signal to get a second trigger out, I use that a lot in the manual patch demos in order to show sort of that basically anywhere where you're using Anna for gates, you get sort of another gate sequence for free. Yeah, this is a pretty funky little patch. I hope you think so as well. Hope that this helps open up some doors for you with your Anna patching. It doesn't just do, you know, audio and weird, you know, wobbly control voltages. There's a lot of little Swiss Army knife thing. You know, you don't need your corkscrew every day, but when you need it, it's real handy to have. So again, I hope that you enjoyed this patch demo. I hope you're having a lovely day. Thank you for watching.